Imagine, Episode 20, by Bernard King and Jemma Lumarine. Jerome is trapped. He is Jemma's puppet, and she is about to pull his strings. Her plotting had gone further than her husband. Now her publisher was next in the queue. Who would be next? Her accountant? Her tax inspector? As efficiently and as quickly as you saw off Walter, she said. Supposing I refuse, then you will go to jail. Cold and matter-of-fact were both her tone and her stare, for murder and God knows how many firearms offences. Her offer to phone Charlie for another grenade for the murder was meant to be sarcastic. She could not know her remark had lit a fuse. It was go. Jemma would die now. Everything was ready. The grenade on his belt, just behind his left hip, would slip easily into his hand. The wall behind them was low, but high enough if he lay flat to protect him from the blast. He could run through the spinney and out the other side before anyone realized what had happened. His quick glance around had established there was no one within a quarter of a mile of the bench, well outside the killing radius of the grenade. It was an opportunity too good to waste. Most publishers deserve an early death anyway. Jemma was still distant. He was suddenly calm, as he had been in the desert when Iraqi troops were charging at his company with bayonets fixed. Deadly calm, waiting for the precise moment to kill first. Those could be your last words, Jemma. The thought was dispassionate. He was ready. With the grenade in his hand, pulling the firing pin and releasing the trigger lever would take 1 second. To roll the grenade in front of Jemma and out of her reach would take 2 seconds. To stand on the bench seat and jump over the wall, another 2 seconds. The drop behind the wall would take another second. The grenade had a 6-second fuse. Everything slotted. No thinking, no remorse. The bitch was going to die. He moved so fast, his drop behind the wall gave him half a second to curl up for safety. Vaguely, he saw Jemma leaning away from him as he leapt up, and then damp, stinking grass was blocking his nose as his face hit the ground. The mind-shattering explosion, debris, parts of Jemma falling around him, and the acrid smell of high explosive were a split second away. He pressed his face further into the grass, covered his head with his hands, and curled up tighter in a ball. A dull thud to his right opened his eyes. A dull thud did not fit. Grenades did not make dull thuds. Slowly, he uncovered his head, turning his face towards the sound. His grenade was beside him. His intended leap of terror was cancelled. Laughter, directly above him, was changing his drama. Her blonde hair fell over her face as she leaned over the wall. "That's a gotcha," she giggled. The tension, excitement, and fear drained from Jerome, leaving disbelief and a huge sense of exhaustion. "I am a novelist, sweetheart." She climbed over the wall and sat on the grass beside him. "It was obvious you were going to try and kill me. I couldn't let it happen, darling. We're only on page 177, and readers don't buy short fiction." She described his mental state after he left her flat, his obvious reaction, and the method he would use to kill her. She decided to set up the murder scene for him, choosing the ideal spot to fit his plan in Richmond Park. Another few pages for Imagine? The bitterness loading his question simply made her smile. "Oh yes, a good few." She was laughing at him again. "But Jerome, you have not asked why the grenade did not go off." He didn't care. She could read him like a book. He was like 90% of the population, always thinking in straight lines. He couldn't handle her. His hands were shaking, and even that didn't make sense. Were they shaking with frustration or fury? He could no longer tell the difference. But one thing was certain. He could not have her controlling him. I asked Charlie to take the powder out. She knew Charlie. How did she know Charlie? Shit. He told her where he got his guns from in his arsenal. With her money and power, she could find anyone. He'd kill the bastard. Now I suppose you're going to kill him, she smiled. For fuck's sake, shut up. He jumped, putting the wall between them. She picked up the contract, slipped it into her bag before handing him another smaller envelope. That's my publisher's name, address, and office. I shall contact you again with the details of his removal. When he's dead, I shall expect a full report. She turned, but stopped. Oh, if anything happens to me, there are several envelopes in several places explaining who my killer is. Just before she entered the spinney, she turned again. You see how I look after you, darling? I saved you from certain arrest today. This time she did not laugh, but bullied him further with a look of superior contempt. The hard seat of the bench matched his thoughts. This could go on for years. He would have to jump to her at every whim. Women were evil bitches. They let you down and messed you up. He could shoot her, a long-distance hit. He would be arrested, but she would be dead. There wasn't much profit in that equation. He sat for a long time on the bench, hating Jemma. But the rule of problems kept interrupting his loathing. The rule told him there was only one person who could solve his problems, and his name was Jerome. Also, the rule continued, there was only one that could cause him problems, and that was Jerome as well. He did not have the intellect to match Jemma. She had been to university, she lived by her thinking, she was a professional liar. As huge was her success, it was balanced by his depth of failure. The evening chill prodded him upright. His bottom molded to the seat, making his first few steps uncomfortable. His whole life was uncomfortable. He was stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea. The future was no longer under his control. He could not return to his old, safe life. He could not return to any life. His universe centered around Jemma. So he must change it. And the first change would be to free himself from Jemma. Her control over him must be broken, and with the revelation of her parked letters, it left only one answer. It was almost dark before he slowly pushed open his front door. He had walked back from the park, 2 hours of slow, deliberate, and painful thoughts. A letter lay on his doormat. Picking it up, he stared at the name of the sender on the back. A firm of solicitors he had never heard of had written to him. He tossed the letter, unopened, onto the kitchen table. He had other things to think about. He had the answer to Jemma Lumery. He had the answer to a lot of things. Jemma, calling him a weak little wimp, had opened a new door in his reasoning. He had been greater in the army, Mr. Macho, bawling orders and fighting. But why had he joined the army? It was because he liked guns, he had told himself. Guns were protection. The army was also a protection from life. He had heard of soldiers leaving the army and within months signing back on again. They couldn't take responsibility. They couldn't make decisions. They couldn't handle money. They couldn't handle marriage. They couldn't handle... He stopped the whirl. He was beginning to shake again. Maybe he was one of those. Maybe his wife had dreaded him coming home and having to look after him again. That was why she had fled. His job was almost insignificant, yet even when he had to make small choices, he realized he would sometimes break out in a sweat. Maybe the world was right and he was wrong. Snobs did not know they were snobs. Bores did not know they bored. And perhaps the weak did not know they were weak. Jemma had picked him up and used him exactly as she wanted. He opened the fridge to get a bottle of vodka and cursed. Milk was the only bottle on offer. He had disposed of all his booze. No matter. With the help from one of his friends, he would settle everything. He should wash and change, but there was no time. He had to stop the terrible thoughts that were telling him terrible truths. Slowly he climbed the stairs, fumbled out the keys to his armory, and gently pushed the door open. The macho smell of machine oil and bare metal cuddled around him. leading him to Field Marshal Montgomery, the tough canvas seat moulding itself to his bottom. He looked closely around the room at each of his friends, allowing each the same few seconds, as if he would feel guilty if he passed one over too quickly. His tie was tightened by a day of perspiring, and took an impatient lunge with his finger to break the knot. He would not come into this room again. All he had to do was select the friend who would do his work quickly and efficiently. He chose, after much dallying, the Smith & Wesson. 6 bullets tinkled into place. The click as he closed the chamber was loud and final. Slipping it into the pocket of his suit brought discomfort. It weighed him down on one side and made a huge bulge in the material. It did not matter. Nothing mattered except one more task. Automatically, he started his closing and locking door routine. Why? Why was he locking the door? Even that did not matter anymore. Throwing the keys along the hall, he started a slow tread downstairs. What he was about to do would cause a lot of trouble for a lot of people. But for the first time in his life, he did not care. He had worried about upsetting others long enough. This time, it was his turn to cause problems. Halfway down the staircase, he stopped. He had not locked the front door. His keys tinkled in the silence as he pulled them out of his pocket, but it did not matter. He had already told himself nothing mattered. With a disparaging toss, he threw the keys against the front door. He had no further use for them. He stopped again on the bottom step. He would stop everything. It would be easy with his friend. He had killed once this month. It would be nothing to kill again. Lifting the revolver, he opened his mouth. The cold barrel stung his tongue, but just for a second. Then the barrel was hot, screaming hot. The round exploded the inside of his head, and he toppled forward. It really had been easy. So very, very easy. Jemma wrenched her eyes away from her screen to look at her watch. She had been writing for 6 hours. Imagine was not going well. Since the grand reveal, the edge had gone off her work. Publicity blighted her life. It had intruded to such an extent she had had to hire a secretary to control it. While she had been a quasi-celebrity when Walter was alive, now the adoration was all hers, and it had become a major nuisance. She could no longer go out, go shopping, and even in the semi-protected venues like the theatre, she was besieged by her fans. She read the last 4 paragraphs again, highlighted them, and pressed delete. A thought she had been keeping submerged for several days surfaced once again. It was a situation she did not appreciate. Sensible thought told her she was allowing her imagination to carry her away from her fiction into real life. But her writing was saying otherwise. She had just deleted 4 paragraphs of Imagine, but she knew the last week of work had been little more than ordinary. Because of Jerome. Because Jerome was not around. Because Jerome was not providing her with material. Because she needed Jerome. Imagine was Jerome, and while he was not jiggling on the end of her string, she could not go forward with the story. For an hour she sat in the dark, working out a new adventure for her slave. A new sex game might be the answer, just to fill in time before he killed her publisher. Perhaps bring another woman into it, or another man. Yes, a foursome would be a natural progression for the story. It would be amusing for her to seduce a new couple. Jerome would be at home now. It was too dangerous to telephone him, so she would drive round and call on him personally. She also had the details for the extinction of her publisher, but she had to ensure they were destroyed the moment he had read them. She had ordered a big gun from Charlie, and the gun he had procured was huge, the black steel bulk making her hands seem small and white and fragile. It also weighed down her bag uncomfortably. She had fired the weapon on the range in Pond Street during the day when she knew Jerome would be at work. Her act of fright when she had been with Jerome at the range, gave him the character she wanted him to see. She would have had no compunction using the gun should she have to, although she judged it unlikely Jerome would try another ambush. Not now that he knew about the letters. He would not welcome her. She had remembered the wonderful look of hate that he had fired at her in the park. She really had wrestled with a fitting description of it in Imagine. She must remember to turn her pocket recorder on to catch the depth and nuances of his fury in their coming conversation. He should be grateful for the new tasks she had for him. It would not only keep him busy and help taking his mind off hating her, it would also, hopefully, provide the ending for Imagine. She was pleased with the new ending for the book. Killing her editor was wonderful material, and a fitting revenge for trapping a young, unknown, hopeful, enthusiastic, and gullible writer in an unbreakable contract. It was logical, therefore, if the contract was unbreakable, then the publisher would have to be broken. After all, 30% he took was way over the norm. His rip-off had rankled for 25 years. Now his moment for repayment was rising on the horizon. The video she had made from the top of the cliff when Jerome handed the grenade to Walter, and the recordings of their conversation before the crime, would convict him with the need for only a very short trial, so she was giving him a job he could not refuse. And again, he was totally unconnected with the world of publishing. The chance of him getting caught were remote, and so he would still be available for further adventures. There were still one or two variables in her plan that she would have to sort out with Jerome. She had been too hard on him. From his expression, she realized she was destroying him. But it was necessary. She had never seen, or even with a prolific imagination, found it so hard to describe the physical response to being destroyed emotionally. But Jerome had come good. Her words had hit him like blows. The champagne made him sick, and his eyes, he had very expressive eyes, provided several paragraphs that must nail her readers to their chairs with disbelief, shock, and anger. The same emotions that had chased each other in Jerome's popping stare. Persuading readers to hate the principal character in the book, the woman, was a sure hook. The trade-off for the destruction was Jeremy's alienation. She had not thought it through. He was totally safe. Jerome was an unknown in her life. She had seen to that, and had no connection to Walter or her family. Unless she whispered in the right ear, revealed her affair and his secret room, Jeremy was not only totally safe, he was a prisoner bricked up in his little life with the truth blocking the only exit. She really had scored from every angle. She had a slave for life, the material for a book, a thriller-line plot, and Jerome would, on completion of his next little task, provide the ending for the novel. Then, what would she do with him? She had only been concerned with the removal of her husband and writing the book. Her thinking had stopped there. It was a problem she would think about when his use was finished. She parked a street away from his house. The less evidence of her visit, the better. Turning the corner of the street, filled with identical houses, she entered Jerome's world and stopped. His house was the third identical one on the right, only now it was not identical. The slight breeze that had caused the movement and the rippling of the blue and white police tape across the front of Jerome's property marked it dramatically out from the others. Already stopped, Jemma looked at the policewoman guarding the front door. The girl was looking down the road in the opposite direction. Jemma could edge discreetly away back around the corner. It was the correct thing to do, but fate decided otherwise. The policewoman had turned suddenly, fixing the newcomer in the road with a regulation stare of suspicion that her 2 years in the force had honed to include hard-eyed threat. They found his arsenal. It was her immediate conclusion, a conclusion hotly pursued by savage reality. Shit! Her slave had been arrested. This was not at all in her script. Something serious? She forced a smile at the regulation stare. You can carry on, madam. The policewoman, who should have finished her shift 2 hours ago, was grateful to have someone to snap at. 10 retorts sprang to Gemma's lip. 10 retorts sprang to Gemma's lip. 10 retorts sprang to Gemma's lips. But this was not a moment to become involved or remembered. Instead, Jemma continued further along the road until out of sight of the constable. Pressing a number out of a telephone, she phoned Julian. "It'll cost you 50, ground Julian. Done. Her snap matched her impatience and rage. It took Julian, her bent copper, 3 minutes to come back to her. Her telephone snapped shut, and then worse, its slim case cracked, trapping. Her telephone snapped shut, and then worse, its slim case cracked, trapped in her white knuckles. Probable suicide, a Jerome. Julian's answer was the telephone's final speech. Shocked, Jemma let the instrument drop to the pavement. Then fury, red and seething, exploded. No, no, no! Her foot stamped the pavement, throwing her forward into a furious stride. Tears of wrath tumbled down her face from eyes blinded and brimming with anger. What a fool! Snatching open the door of a car, she hurled her backside onto the seat. Anticipation was not only waiting for pleasure, it was also guessing the future. What a fool she had been. Again she had underestimated. Love had almost ruined her life, and it had now killed Jerome. And she gripped the wheel of the car as if trying to strangle her fury. It had destroyed her story. What a weak bastard she had chosen. Her writer's mind was already scanning all angles, and one was a horror comic. Supposing Jerome had left a letter, supposing he had confessed all, implicating her. He had nothing to lose. His revenge on her must have been an attraction. Her phone was in pieces. She needed to find out immediately. The telephone box was on the main road, with windows missing. Hearing was difficult above the roar of the traffic. Julian said it would take 10 minutes for him to find the report on the suicide. In fact, it took him 15. There was an unopened envelope. Gemma's heart raced. The bastard, but what else could she expect the way she had treated him? Julian was laughing. Bit ironic, this. What was inside? Jemma just managed to keep her voice below a scream and hold the telephone steady. It was from a solicitor. His wife had left £600,000. Jerome is dead, and Jemma cannot finish Imagine. But you have been promised 2 endings to Imagine. So listen to the next episode of Imagine.